Radiant Black, issue number 29.5. So this is Nathan's timeline, where Nathan is the Radiant Black and he's the one completing all the tests. And I will say he's doing a pretty good job. 29.5 is basically the happy timeline because everything is going well for Nathan. Well, minus the fact that his dad died in the last issue, so maybe not everything is going too well, but all the superheroes are still alive. None of the cities have been destroyed. So basically, the only casualty was his father. And we start out this issue with Ava sending Shift through a bunch of portals before dumping him in, I believe it's Africa, just because of the giraffes in the background. And then she collapses on a bench. And then that's when we cut to Chicago, where Marshall is rushing over to where Satomi and Nathan are. And he goes to comfort Nathan over the fact that his dad died. And that's when a bunch of catalyst ships show up. They're trying to discuss, okay, what are we going to do? We have to buy some time. We have to come up with something. We can't take them all on right now. What are we going to do? And Premiere shows up and basically asks them a question. He's assessment finalized, display results, execute, question mark. And that's when Ava shows up and portals all of them away. And they basically explain, well, Premiere's not going to do anything. He's a computer. He needs an input. So until we answer him, there's nothing he's going to do. So we have some time to figure things out. And that's when they come across this closed building where Wendell is at. Wendell is just going crazy, I guess. He's basically just meditating, using his powers to look at all the different timelines. And he ends up sending Marshall and Nathan into the mainline timeline. So the timeline where Marshall is the Radiant Black, he ends up sending them there. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, what happened? And they realize that all their phones are blowing up. And so they discover that if their phones are blowing up, not like physically blowing up, but blowing up in the sense that they're getting a bunch of messages, and they're getting messages from the people here on this universe, this timeline. And that means that this has got to be like a parallel universe. And they're wondering, well, if this is a parallel universe, maybe this is a universe where the Radiant won. In which case, all we got to do is figure out how they went about winning, and then just copy that back in our timeline. But as they go investigate, they just see that Chicago is completely destroyed. They see that Ava and Satomi are dead. Basically, everything I covered in my issue 29 review. So yeah, they see Marshall, who is the Radiant Black, and he basically ends up sending Nathan and Marshall of 29.5 back into their timeline. How he has the power to do that, I don't know. I mean, there are pink portals that show up, so you would think, okay, maybe Ava does it. But if you look at the image, you see that mainline Marshall has his hand out and says, do better. And then that's when they get teleported. So I'm like, is he teleporting them back or is Ava teleporting them back? If it's Ava, how would she know where they're at? But yeah, basically 29.5's version of Marshall and Nathan end up getting a glimpse of what's happening in the mainline run. And they see that Marshall has apparently gone crazy, which completely destroys the Marshall of the 0.5 timeline. Where he's like, how could I have done that? How could I have killed all my friends? This doesn't make any sense. He's just basically freaking out. And there's going to be some more. I'm not going to spoil everything. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I don't care for Nathan as the Radiant. I really don't. And this right here, this story, it doesn't really feel like Nathan's story in a sense. The way that Marshall acts in this timeline, he acts a little bit more like a tech genius. Well, I don't want to say a tech genius, but he's the one that's more of a techie, which doesn't make sense because Marshall wasn't like that. Between the two of them, Marshall was more of the emotions and Nathan was more of the logic, kind of, somewhat. And so I don't know, it feels like the 0.5 was written for Marshall and the main line was written for Nathan. Because the voting had Marshall win, it feels like the writer just put Marshall in Nathan's timeline and then kind of made it a little bit worse. And then he threw Nathan in Marshall's timeline and made it a little bit better. It seems like he's trying to push people to want Nathan as the Radiant. That's just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong on that. But every time when I read these, it really seems like he's trying to push for Nathan to be the Radiant. Like he's trying to push it on the audience that, hey, look, wouldn't it be better if Nathan was a Radiant? Like, look at all the better ways that Nathan is doing things over Marshall. And it just doesn't make sense because from what we've seen since the beginning, Marshall has always been the better Radiant. Like he's always been able to understand the powers a lot more easily. He's the one that is willing to work with other people more. Not to say that Nathan wasn't willing to work with other people, but Nathan doesn't know these other people. Nathan doesn't really know Satomi and Wendell and Ava. Well, I mean, I guess he kind of knows Wendell from after he woke up, but Marshall's the one that's familiar with all of them. Marshall's the one that's fought with them. Marshall's the one that's helped them out in their own spin-offs and things like that. So it just seems weird that in Marshall's timeline, Marshall is unwilling to gather help from his friends, yet in Nathan's timeline, Nathan is willing to gather help from strangers he doesn't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't really care for the Nathan character. I just never really found him all that interesting. I found him kind of boring, especially as a Radiant. To me, Marshall was always the more intriguing character. Marshall is a complete loser in life. This is a guy who has problems with authority figures, gets into confrontations he doesn't need to be getting into, kind of bounces around from job to job. He has nothing going for him. And then he gets the Radiant powers because his best friend gets almost brain dead and put into a hospital, gets dumped into a coma. And now he has new responsibilities. And so he starts working at them. And he's actually doing a pretty decent job. And now he realizes, you know what? I finally have purpose in my life. Like everything in my life absolutely sucks. But I'm good at this. This is one thing that I'm actually good at. Like that's a more interesting story to me. Whereas Nathan is just, oh, I want to be a screenwriter, but I'm not doing well. I'm in debt now, so I have to move back in with my mom. And then I get these powers, but I'm still want to be a screenwriter. And so it seems like with Nathan that the writing career is more important than the superheroing. Even later on, like we have a whole arc where he goes to LA to talk to a producer to get his script done. Like it just really seems like superheroing is the last thing on his mind. The reason why he's focusing on it now is just because of the whole Catalyst situation. But if it wasn't for that, he would still be bouncing between the two. And I don't care for that. Like I don't care for him as a character really. I think he works better as the sidekick. I think he works better as the person who can kind of ground Marshall a little bit. Like he can kind of throw in the more normie ideas and stuff at Marshall and kind of rein Marshall's emotions in. But Marshall seems like the better Radiant. And it feels like this Catalyst War is a writer trying to do everything that they can to paint Marshall as the bad Radiant and Nathan as the good Radiant. Again, I could be wrong, but it feels like that. It feels like basically Marshall was maybe supposed to be the Radiant only temporarily, but people really liked it. And so they did a poll to see, like, hey, should Nathan be the Radiant again? Or should we keep it on Marshall? And they were hoping that Nathan would win. But Marshall won. And so now they have the split timeline where they're trying to show, look how bad Marshall is as a Radiant, and look how good Nathan is as a Radiant. I could be wrong. This is just like the feeling that I get while reading these issues, which is a shame. Because like I said before, like Marshall is the more intriguing character. He's the character with the flaws. He's the character that has like just the most interest in becoming the Radiant, in the sense that like this is a guy who, again, he has nothing going for him in his life except for this. This is like his calling. Whereas with Nathan, it's just something that he does on the side while trying to get a writing career going. So yeah, while the whole split timeline thing is interesting, I'm hoping that we're coming to a conclusion on this. I hate having to read two separate issues every time a new series comes out just so I can get the two different timelines. Just put us back into one timeline. I hope this Catalyst War arc ends, and I'm hoping that Marshall ends up winning and becoming the Radiant, just because he's the more interesting Radiant to me. But what do you guys think? Who would you guys want as Radiant? Which timeline do you prefer? And does my opinions make sense in the whole, like, the writer seems to really be pushing for Nathan, or am I just looking way too much into something that's not there? Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Later. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, I still want to thank you for watching it this far, and I hope the next one is more to your liking. With that said, thank you once again, and I hope you guys and gals have a good one. Later.